Good morning, Mr. Hudson.
Good morning, sir.
And welcome all to part 7 of Alan Hudson's American Dream. Oh, we've covered an awful lot of ground through the American Dream, My Life, My Music, Hood at 50, etc., etc. But on the last podcast, we started by talking of alcohol and your favourite bourbon tipple. How's that doing? Is there still any left in the bottle?
Well, I've still got a few empty bottles, actually. I'm looking at one now, and it's about a quarter full Crown Royal Deluxe, which I discovered in Seattle in 1978, stroke 79. So that will stay with me. That will always be my great memory of Seattle.
And of course, Rolling Rock. That was that a Canadian drink? I was shopping the other day. I was with one of my old ladies, and we're talking about Rolling Rock, and someone said, "From Canada, that is, mate." I thought, blimey, in the middle of Harborne, but it certainly is a North American lager that you liked, and you can't get it over in this country, can you? It's not on
No,
license.
it's more. I discovered that as well in Florida. In Florida, they didn't have that in Seattle. I don't think.
Yeah.
They when I was in Tampa Bay, spent a lot of time in Tampa Bay, down in Florida, and I found that in one of the bars and fell in love with that. It was, beer's not really my kick, but this is nice beer, And then, strangely enough, I come back and when I finished in Stoke. My second spell at Stoke, we used to pop in a little bar on Hart's Hill where Tony Millard actually nearly got his pub the other month, and we used to go in this little place opposite where Tony was going to get the pub, and they had Rolling Rock in there, the only place I've ever known in England to have it, so it's unbelievable. There obviously are places out there. Somebody might listen to this and go, "Well, we got it," but I've never found it anywhere else, Paul.
But it's
Great stuff.
absolutely where I'm
It sounds
going.
like we're a couple of alcoholics talking over the phone, comparing liquor, but it's like anything else when we do the shows, isn't it? It's whether it's a song or a beer or whatever, something reminds you of a place, and I think that's what life's all about. That's why we watch movies, because to remind us of special memories, and I think that them places are very special. I mean, when you get, that's what annoys me with today's footballer, and when they cheat and everything like that, they've got professional football is such a great profession, and from the age of 15 being an apprentice, and you get to see the world, and you go depending what club you're at. That's why Waddington was such a great manager. He liked to go on trips. He had his own turnstile at Stoke, I believe, that he used to use to take us on trips all around the world. And he used to say, I think I mentioned it on one of our shows, that he'd take boys away and bring them back men, and that's where you get your memories from. I was at such and such a place when I found that, or I discovered that, and traveling is such a fantastic education. And I think if you got these main people on TV, I was very sad to hear the thing with Graham Saunders. That was a disgrace what's happened with him on telly, because he's apart from Roy Keane, who's a little bit scatty at times, but he's been there and done it, and he knows what he's talking about. And Graham Saunders is probably the master on television of talking about football, and he was a great player himself. And obviously, I told you the thing what he did for my friend in Seattle when his kid was dying, young Tommy Jenkins, and Graham sent him a message because he was a Liverpool supporter. These things like that, you don't forget that. And Ferguson, when I was at Stoke and another place, I met a Manchester United supporter who was dying of cancer, and he was such a nice fellow. It was one of those hits home again. It's always the good ones. And I wrote to Sir Alex, and I told him all about him. And next thing you know, there was a parcel come through. I didn't expect anything. I don't, because you can imagine how many offers he gets.
Yeah.
And a couple of days later, this fella's kids come in crying, and he said, "What you done for my dad was incredible." I said, "Well, I didn't do anything." I said, "These are the things you don't read in the paper about Alex Ferguson." He sent that package here. So, it's these people, these football fans that we always go on off about, that don't realise that the what was also a human race. It's all about, you find out who's who in it, and people like Alex Ferguson are right ahead in that race, because they're good people and
Absolutely.
they care about people, and it's people get the wrong impression of the Mavericks and people like that. Don Shanks called me from Tampa the other day, and I said, "Look, mate, it's always going to be hard for the likes of you and me. We've done the coaching school in Stoke, and it was a fantastic success, but we had no money." I said, "But we're the bad guys, and we'll always be looked at the bad guys. We don't get the help, we deserve."
Absolutely. I don't think you're looked at as the bad guys in the eyes of normal people, in terms of the press, etc., and the media. You're the guys that didn't conform, and therefore they can't control you. If they can't control you, they move on to people that they can control. And I guess like Graham, and I guess like some of the older guys on TV these days, they're almost uncontrollable, and they can put these puppets and muppets in the place that will laugh when they're told to laugh. They will do what they're told to do, and it's just dumbed down TV, and it's dumbed down football. But where I was going with the alcohol, and we're not alcoholics, but we both do like a drink. It's all about the licensing. And in Bermuda, licensing got you into trouble, didn't it? So let's start there.
Well, Bermuda's one of those unfinished business things with me. I've
Yeah,
had two trips there. Once me and a great friend in Stoke, Terry Bate, and another friend, Trevor Cotton, we took on the world, and we come unstuck. We met a fella called Rodney Marsh who let us down, and he's one of the bad guys in my eyes.
yeah.
And we ended up through a tournament falling apart in Tampa Bay. That we ended up in Bermuda on a one-way ticket, which had never been done before. I'm led to believe. Uh, but me and my friend got there, and we ended up, fast forward a month, and we was under house arrest. So, and I know I was at Chelsea the other week with a couple of Bermudans, and they still live there, and they didn't know anything about this. I didn't know them at the time, and it's the most amazing story. I mean, we were very, very close. If we and the most ironic part of the Bermuda situation was, out of all the, that story. Out of all the bars in all the world, there was the head copper in Bermuda on that island was from Stoke-on-Trent, and he didn't know anything about football. I don't know whether he found his family and find out who I was or whatever, but he saved their life. If we would have got a bad cop, we could have been put away quite easily. But of course, I knew Clyde Best, who's big on the island, and it's just such a small island. It's an amazing place, but I've been there twice, and once I've been there on a house arrest, and two I got married, which was a disaster. So I've got some unfinished business. I'm still thinking a third time lucky. If my case goes as well as I think with the FA, then I will return and hopefully come out unscathed.
But
But
the house arrest scenario, it come about due to the tournament. But my understanding is from reading your posts on your fantastic Facebook pages, I've got to say, Al. And by the way, guys, there are a number of merchandise, commemorative T-shirts. We've done many podcasts that I said at the top of the show here today. Hudson 73, Hudson 74, Hudson 84 in particular were iconic 12-month periods for you, Al, because it was A, the last 12 months at Stoke City, B, the first the last 12 months at Chelsea, first 12 months at Stoke City, and 84 was when you saved Stoke City from the rapids of relegation and steered them through to the calmer waters of survival on the final day when your mate done you a favour, although he says he didn't, but you beat Wolves 4-0. But those commemorative shirts are all available on srbmedia.co.uk/shop, and we are putting them on all our media network outlets, Alan Hudson's admin page, SRB Media's page, etc., etc. So you can get them from there. But the licensing and that beer, you were selling them, wasn't you? The alcohol, but you didn't have a license. That's how you got arrested, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It was. Well, the amazing thing about it was, what I can still not work out is that I sat down with a top man,
Mm,
with the main brewers on the island, the Gosling,
yeah,
and they supply everything. They sell. My friend over there at the time had his own nightclub, but it was a kind of day nightclub where it's a nice kind of place where you could take the wife or girlfriend or both. Um, and that was all Gosling. Everything went through Gosling. What I can't understand to this day uh, is why, before they sold us this huge amount of alcohol, is why they didn't tell us we needed a license
yeah,
to sell it.
yeah,
Why? How? I mean, we're three strangers on the island. Uh, they didn't really. It wasn't as if they knew me personally as a footballer, a former footballer, but they just sold us without telling us that you needed a license to sell it, and they let us set the whole stadium up, take over all the bars, get ready for it, and it was almost as if it was a setup. It was, and then a day before we sold one pint of beer or a glass of beer, a cop turns up on a motorbike, and I went over to see him. I was going to welcome him to the match because it was just before the match. So the Scottish bagpipes were out for my friend, and Aberdeen were there, and I said it was a lovely Bermuda night, and I said, "Can I get you a beer?" And he said, "No." He said, "I'm actually on duty." He said, "And I've got to tell you that I'd like to see your license." And that was it. They pulled the plug on us. So that's that's how it all came about. And I was kind of looking over my shoulder for help, and there was no one there. And the next thing you know, up crops Inspector Harrison, and he was a lifesaver without really knowing it. He didn't do us any favors by any stretch of the imagination, but he just did warn us. He said that every word out. There was three of us and a fella called David Connolly who had the club. He said, if I hear one word from any of the four of you that is not becomes an untruth, he said, there's a place on the edge of the island called Casemates, and you'll be in there. And he said, you come out with if you get out, you escape, but you'll have AIDS, and if you stay in there, you'll never come out. If you don't escape, it's one of those. It was, and all there, and where they put this Casemates was where all the cruise boats come into the island. So if you got bars on your window, which you obviously have, so you see all the cruise ships coming in, and you think, oh my God, what am I missing? So it's one of those. It's not like Wormwood Scrubs or anything like that where they put the chain, my mate, the great chain robber and all that. There's no cruise ships anywhere. They're just cut off from the entire world. So yeah, I had to rustle up. A great friend of mine in London called Jack Bannon had to pull up some money as well to get us off the island. And I mean, we come out, we were innocent and they knew it. It was just a matter of that. What happened is when we took over the stadium and took over the bars that usually open for any event. I mean, there's hardly any events go on there. That's the thing. It wasn't as if we were treading on anyone's toes. and then they said, well, this ain't going to happen, and but it did happen. We played the game. Aberdeen played, and we come out there, and we were stuck on the island for about 6, 8 weeks, and it was, and there was another couple in the Belmont Hotel with us, and they were out on a golfing holiday, and every day we came in, we'd been out enjoying ourselves, followed by a cop or two, in plain clothes, and they say, "God, we paid a fortune for this holiday, and you're stuck here, and you can't get out." So I said, "Well, they say crime doesn't pay, but we haven't really done a crime, but we're charged, and now we're stuck here. But what we're in paradise, So there was an upside to it, but it ruined the relationship with my girlfriend. We finished. It ruined my other friend's marriage, and I lost the house. He lost the house. So we come back. We had to start again. So it's not. It's all my stories. They're always funny, but they're very. I never come out on the good side of it.
Parky
But
was absolutely right about you, though, wasn't he? When he said that apart from being abducted by an alien, there isn't anything that hasn't happened to Alan Hudson, but, give it time.
yeah, yeah. I mean, even yesterday, I've been this morning. I'm smarting this morning because over a bet I had yesterday, and I went to have a bet yesterday, and I'd lost. I backed Bournemouth to beat Chelsea, which I think they should have done. The fella missed a header with Corbin out to go, and I think Frank would have suffered another defeat. But they come back and they got 2 late goals. And I went out and had another bet. I backed Cremonese last night in the Italian league, and they won. So I got my money back. But when I got to the betting shop, I thought I had more money than what I did, and they wouldn't give me the right price. And because I've got a dispute with Paddy Power, I go in William Hill. And I woke up this morning, although my bet won, I'm about £1,500 down. It's unbelievable, unbelievable. And that is what happens when you back a winner.
It's a good
It,
job
it,
you actually won out, to be fair. You do.
well, yeah, well, that would have done, at least that 1,500 quid would have at least doubled, but that would have been a deficit. But I mean, I got out of trouble, and I can hold my head out and go out and have it's my uncle's birthday today, and so I'm going out for lunch with him, so that will cover that one. So I won enough yesterday to cover today's excursions. But that's what happens. Even that song, even the bad times are good, and everything else. It's amazing, really. But after the car accident, when you took so many knocks, it's amazing how you do get used to it.
It's water off a duck's back, isn't it, really? You've been through a lot worse. It's just the way it is. So you just take
Yeah.
it in your stride and get on with it. We were
Well,
talking about.
I put on a very, very brave face, mate. I've got
Yeah.
a great, I've got the mask, and I put that on when I go out, and everyone think, oh, he's the happiest man. When I was in hospital, my friends and family couldn't believe how can you be happy in here? And I said, well, it's where I am. This is where I'm going to get better. So
Yeah.
make the most of it. And I said, and a happy face is better than a miserable face. So, I'm going to fight this with a happy face. So that's the way it goes. And I believe that a smile is, laughter is a very healthy thing.
Absolutely. It's also contagious. Gambling and happy times in America with Seattle was in England. There's always been a card school, and players have always liked to have a little bit of a flutter, although these days you certainly can't bet on yourselves. Was there anything like that out in America? Did you find a culture like that when you first went out in 1979 to Seattle, Al?
Well, but I was very fortunate in many ways that the king of the jungle was out there, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Harry Redknapp was assistant manager to our great friend Jimmy Gabriel, passed last year. A wonderful, wonderful man. And Harry was out there, and Harry, now, since he won the king of the jungle, he's got more horses, and he's catching JP McManus up. But yeah, we used to go to a terrific racetrack there called Long Acres, and that was out. And we used to come in and have a day out and come in the next day. And Harry would be in the reserve team coach at that time, You know, he used to give the lads tips. You know, I remember the couple of tips we did on the show about they're still looking for the horses running now. One was a loose button. He said, "You got back. Look out for this horse, loose button." He said, "He's got to come off." You know, and they couldn't get the joke. The Americans couldn't get it, and he said the other ones. He said you got to look out for the dusty carpet. He said it's never been beat. And they didn't get it. They didn't get it. And this is the Harry Redknapp book of jokes, you know. So he was a funny bloke. And so Harry and I and a few other lads would book a table and go down to Long Acres, and you know, it's like a working holiday. It was, but as I've stated many times, you know, I've always said to the kids who were in our team and who were on the brink that this is I also always used to try and take them out and have a good time with them, but I'd make the point that training the next day is, you know, got to train harder than ever, you know. So it was good. It was people that used to run that league down have got the wrong idea of it all. You know, there was so many brilliant players over there, young and old, and it's coming to fruition now. And obviously, we've touched on my Anthony, and you know, hopefully these kids can go on and do a bit better while he's manager. You know.
Absolutely, he's doing superb, isn't he, at the moment, Anthony? We're going to talk about Anthony in a short while, but I just want to dwell on 1979 at Seattle when you went over there. Jimmy Gabriel was the manager, then Jimmy left, and you know, when you're talking about something and then momentarily you forget Alan Hinton's name. I mean, how can you do that? But Alan had a bigger budget, didn't he, than Jimmy? And he brought in, you know, not being disrespectful, but a better quality of player. Hence, in 1982, you had that fantastic season. But in 1979, he brought over Ron Davis. Now, a lot of people would not have been aware of Ron Davis, certainly in America and this country, the newbie football fans and the Johnny come latelys and the young kids. But Erling Haaland has just scored 35 league goals, which is apparently it's a world record. Nobody's ever scored 35 league goals. But when they actually look at football did start before 1992, they realised that there was a goal scoring chart, and Ron Davies topped it twice: 67, 66, 67, 67, 68. He scored 37 goals in the first year, and then he equalled with George Best, 28 goals. But then Ron, at the end of his career, he came out, didn't he, and played in Seattle with you. What was Ron Davis like?
Well, the amazing thing about Ron was I made my debut against Ron in 1969. 68, 69, and he played for Southampton, and Jimmy Gabriel played, and Ron Davis played in my debut, and they beat us 5-0, and I never see the first team again for another 6 months when we won the FA Cup. But by the time the great journey, again, the great thing about football and the journey, the path you go down, next thing you know, I'm in Seattle. Jimmy's my manager, and who I love dearly. He passed last year, and it was terrible. Great man, and he brought Ron Davis over. Now, Ron was at that time 35, I suppose,
Yeah.
36, and he was on his last legs, and he could. Oh, this man was you know, I suppose to sum Ron up, you could call him the Oliver Reed of football. I mean, this fella could party. He could party, and he could, you know, he was a brilliant. He said to me one day, I was talking of football about him, and I said, he said, he said, I've never seen a player like you. He said, well, what you in trainers for? And he said, we can do things that I've never seen. He said, but I've got to tell you one thing. He said, they never get me. I said, what's that? He said, they can't mark you up in the air. And that's where he was. And Ron used to have this unbelievable knack of getting to the far post and hanging there.
Yeah.
I don't know how he got out. I remember years and years ago when I was apprentice at Chelsea, they reckon the great Tommy Lawton, who was they reckon the best, like John Charles and all
Yes.
them. He used to do a lot of this. Well, it wasn't training, but they reckon he could go in the snooker room at Chelsea, and he would do a standing jump onto the snooker table,
Yeah.
and that was how he would practice his leaping to get up as high as he could. And it was, where you see these old things around the pitch where they hang balls up and players run around and head the balls. Tommy Lawton used to jump on snooker tables. It's a little bit like saying Duncan McKenzie jumped over minis, or whatever. But the little things like that, well, they're things that you let people get on with and think, well, let them do their own thing. But if you got a coach today, they would stop that. They would say that's too dangerous. Don't do that. And they say, well, no, this is how I learned my trade. And Ron somehow had this gift, and it was a gift. I mean, the times you're talking about was when he scored 4 goals at Old Trafford with 4 headers.
Yeah.
And you could have George Best, Bobby Charlton, Dennis Law all day long, but you got someone like, I remember John Sydenham, I think, was on the wing, and he made the 4 goals, and he just crossed from the far post, and in come Ron. That was when Billy Foulkes, the team that won the European Cup in '68. That was, around that time, just before that. And Ron and Manchester United, I think he went to Manchester United in the end, didn't
He
he?
did, yeah. 74, 75, yeah.
Yeah, but that was far too late. It was far too late. But they were after him in the late '60s, and he would have been an incredible asset to their team. And he was such a great fella as well. I used to get on. And then he moved down to Tampa later on. I moved down to Tampa later on, and we started partying again. It was like an ongoing thing, as I say. If I see Oliver Reed on a film the other night, funny enough, and I thought Ron Davis, I thought I'd like to see you go, toe to toe with Ron. I think Ron would have come out maybe in front.
Because he was a big, strong boy as well, wasn't he? He was 37 when he joined Seattle. He played 22 times and scored 1 goal. He
Well,
also
he played centre half, Paul. That's
did he
right.
really?
Yeah, he didn't
Oh,
play
right.
centre forward. Yeah, he didn't play. That was the story with Ron. If anyone could read the record books to get the wrong impression
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
him, yeah,
yeah.
you could look at it and say, well, he didn't score many in the NSL. Well, he played centre half.
Oh, yeah.
And when we this was when Jimmy Gabriel was there, and he brought him in to fill a space at the back, and Ron. He had no legs at that time, and he was there just for a good time, and and he had a great time, and he was a great fellow. It was great to have around the dressing room. It was, he was this word they use today, legend. Ron Davis was a legend, in Wales. I remember seeing him play at Wembley in the home international, him and Wyn Davis, his twin,
Yeah.
where they were no relation. And I don't even think their names were spelt the same. But it was, I remember him then. And, the Terry Hennessy played, and, all people that, you meet these people in that path along, and they're great, unbelievable characters, which is something that we lack today. When England go on into these competitions, there's nobody with the character of an Alan Ball. Alan Ball was famous for going out and partying, and there was never a dull moment. And yet his performances, his consistency level was incredible.
Yeah, there's something about the modern age and the modern game, and they seem to think all you can drink through your football career is water because it helps your career, it helps your fitness, it gives you a longer career in the game. But I mean, that's absolute garbage because Ron started in '59 and ended up in '79. So, he had 20 years pretty much at the top. You guys, I don't think any of the players of today that drink water can hold a candle to you players that drunk something a little bit stiffer than water
Well,
in the
I
olden
think
days.
I agree entirely, and I think the greatest example, before we overlook the greatest example of all, is one of my all-time favourite players was Teddy Sheringham.
Absolutely.
He played at the top level till he actually finished, and he was just a great example for any kid to watch. I watched him from Millwall right to the end, and at all his clubs, and he was he took over from Eric Cantona, which was one of probably the hardest pair of boots to fill. and he was superb. And I've seen him out 3 or 4 times, Ted, and every time I've seen him, he's had a glass of alcohol in his hand.
And to listen to the rest of this podcast, head on over to www.patreon.com/SRB Media. Thank you.